Hey, paisans, the time has come. On the air since 2009, the independently produced, non-FCC compliant champ of video game talk podcasting. Here comes Tiger Claw Radio. Here's your host, Critical Failure.
Welcome everyone to Tiger Claw Radio. Yes, friends, it's that time. Okay, so this week we got a bit of a treat for you. I have... Technically, I guess what you'd describe as an audio comment from our good buddy Hemrawc, but I would consider this more of a guest host, since this is 34 minutes long. So we're going to move things right along. We're going to play another track from the same compilation we've been listening to the last couple weeks. Then I have a Vancast, and then we'll hear from Hemrawc. And there we go. Yeah, it's good stuff. Stick with us. You're listening to Tiger Claw Radio. CF here back in the studio, rounding up a rather lengthy day. So I sat down with my Super Nintendo, which I haven't done in a while. Now, I'm not talking about my Ambernick or the POW Kitty or an emulator or a RetroArch or any of that. I'm talking about my Tube TV, which is, I don't know how big this thing is, but it's not big. I'm going to guess like somewhere between 13 and 17 inches. And my actual Super Nintendo. And I played Romancing Saga 3, which I'd never played before, and honestly had never even heard of before. But I've been importing Japanese games, especially the ones I can find cheap, because a lot of these like more common games in Japan, especially RPGs, they just are cheaper. And this is a nice looking square soft RPG. That I was able to snag the Japanese copy of for like, what was this, like $4 or something? So it isn't an RPG that is in Japanese, so the amount I can play it is very limited. But I was able to play it enough to play through the first dungeon and fight the boss, and yeah, it's a good time. It's a good enough time that I would like to experience it in English. I don't know. I honestly have to look up if that's one we can even play in English. Because I never... This is a series I never got down with in my younger days. So that's cool. I'm hoping that I turn back the page on something, something really cool that I can experience. I think the fire alarm is going off. Hang on a second. Here we go. I think we're good now. We had the battery in the carbon monoxide alarm was starting to run out. So it was doing that thing where you get the beep, beep. I had to take care of that real quick before I drive myself crazy. Right, so I'm at my alternate battle station, which I don't think I've ever actually recorded any podcasting from here. But let's do a quick on the desk. Because right now this is where the Super Nintendo is hooked up. And I had been thinking recently of, oh my gosh, there it is again. Hang on. All right, I'm going to fast forward a bit here and get through it because my father-in-law is messing with the alarm. Want to get done. All right. Quake. This is ultimately where I wanted to go with this. Is Quake just recently got an update on Steam. It's been Bethesda'd, which they recently did with Doom and Doom 2. And I gotta say, I really liked it because the original Quake that you've always had is left intact. They just also added this enhanced version, this newly enhanced version with Quake, from Bethesda. And so that one seems to have a split screen multiplayer, which is crazy to think about for a PC version of Quake, as well as like a functional multiplaying game finder / game browser. I don't know if you played Quake in the last 10 years, but you can still play it online, like the old version of Quake, but it takes some doing. You can't play it stock out of the box. Not easily anyway. Even back in the day, we used to use an external tool to find games that were populated, right? That's what GameSpy was. So now, if you just install Quake off of Steam, then you get achievements, which we never had before. You get the split screen multiplayer, which is cool. And I was able to jump into a multiplayer game right away. There were some people who were playing deathmatch in the cistern, one of the levels, and I was able to play for like, I don't know. I only played for a minute because something I noticed was that the old ping issues were still there. Like, I was playing like with 200 plus ping, so I would shoot and run. Like, as I was strafe shooting, I'd see the stream of bullets coming like 2 steps away from where I am. So everything wasn't in sync. So that didn't last long. I couldn't hang in with that. But I don't know. It seems neat. The whole thing seems really positive for me because, again, they left the original Quake there. It's still there. Like, my setup with all my mods, all that's still there. Quake Spasm no longer launches from Steam. Like, I did that move where I took the exe that it's looking for and I renamed the Quake Spasm exe to that, so that when you launch Quake from Steam, that's what it would launch. But now when you launch it, it asks you, hey, do you want to launch the classic or do you want to launch this new enhanced version? So I think I got to change the exe names again to make it so that I can still use my source port. But here again, the original stuff, it's all there. It's just something nice and new that they added, which is great. It's weird because I've seen people like on the internet today and yesterday being upset about it anyway. And this is the only real gripe I can see, is that if you owned Quake on GOG all this time, they apparently give you a disc image of the original CD so that you can obtain the original music, right? That's something I didn't know that for years and years. I had it on Steam for years and years, and there was no music because in the olden days, in order to play the music, you had to have the CD in the drive. There was no copy protection, but if you had a bootleg copy or if you didn't have the original CD, no music. Never really bothered me much, to be honest. But apparently all this time, GOG has had a solution for that. They would give you the disk image and it would work. And they're saying that they're going to roll out this new Bethesda modern enhanced version of Quake on GOG as well. So if you want that disk image, either buy Quake from there right away, or if you have Quake in your GOG collection, go download it and save it locally. Personally, I'm not that concerned because I actually have my CD-ROM of Quake from olden days. It's one of the few CD-ROMs I have that have survived all these years. But that's a legitimate complaint that the old disk images are going to disappear. Apart from that, a pretty welcome update, if you ask me. It has an in-game mod browser, although it's not really populated yet. The only thing that it contains is the Quake 64 mod, which apparently... I don't remember much about Quake 64 except the 2-player multiplayer, to be perfectly honest. But you can play that on your PC now, if you have it. And the best part was that I didn't have to buy it again. They made an enhanced version of Quake, and they gave it to me because I already had Quake. I love that. I'm looking at you, Baldur's Gate. You know, I already had Baldur's Gate. I already had Icewind Dale, Baldur's Gate 2, all that stuff. I had all that on GOG, and when they rolled out enhanced versions, I didn't get them. So this is really cool. I remember saying these same things when Doom got its remastered edition, because the circumstances were very much the same. But it's an awesome thing that has come from a company that's done a lot of bad things. Bethesda has done some things in the past that have made me raise an eyebrow to them. They're not saints by any stretch of the imagination, but this is a really cool thing that they did. So thank you, Bethesda, for that. If you haven't played Quake in the last 10 years, this is a great time to do it. Head over to Steam, get yourself a copy, and play. That said, here I am back at the desk, back at my alternate battle station. I just got finished playing Romancing Saga 3, and I'm debating. I don't have much here. I have that's what's on the system now, and I've got 3 pachinko games, and then Tetris Attack is the old standby. Tetris Attack is the single game that keeps the Super Nintendo in my life consistently throughout the years, because you can't emulate it correctly. There is no emulation of Tetris Attack that's perfect. The music always gets messed up, or there's latency in the controls or something. So there's always been something wrong whenever I try to emulate that game. So, hard copy forever. And I don't know. I think from here, since I'm done playing my Japanese games, I'll probably dig into my box and fish some stuff out. One of the things I wanted to do in the coming months was start getting things together for a retro junk box. Hemrawc has started 2 of those at this point, and they were both awesome. And I wanted to start the next one because I wanted to keep doing it, and I didn't want to be to be entirely incumbent on him, just to, keep the project rolling. So I got, a bunch of these Japanese games. When I'm done with them, they can go in the box, as well as some other things. I was looking around for things I could just pick up for the box today. So yeah, retro junk box. That's a project that I'd like to breathe new life into. And with that, I think that's about all I got for now. Yeah, I guess I'll throw it back to the studio. This is Sunday night, so tomorrow when I wake up, I'll put all this together, and I'll see you there. See ya. Back in the studio again. Before we shift gears and head things over to Hemrawc, let's go ahead and thank the sponsors. This is a Patreon-sponsored program. These individuals give their resources to make sure TCR can go back every single week. They are Hemrawc, Tecmo Balls, Darabka, and Eric Controller. Thank you all so much for helping keep the lights on. I hope you're enjoying the party. All right, over to Hemrawc.
Greetings and salutations, people of the internet. This is Hemrawc, welcoming you to another episode of Tiger Claw Radio. It's the end of the fiscal year, and things are looking pretty crazy for our good old friend CF. So let's give him a little break. But no need to fear, we got a great show planned for you. We got the tunage, the retro news, even some fail bag. So let's start things off on the right foot by playing a track from Patet. This is one from way, way, way back in the day on the Summer Chip 8 compilation. This is Tropical Default. welcome back. Let's look at some retro news. The first thing that I have here is an article from Retro Dodo. This is one about the A500 Mini Classic console. Yes, you heard me right. We have a mini Amiga. For those who may not be familiar, Amiga was the continuation of the Commodore line. Appeared on the market in 1987, at least the Amiga 500. It seemed to be more popular in Europe than in North America, so maybe our European listeners may be more excited about this. But just to put in perspective, it plays several of the DOS-type games. So if you've seen it in DOS and it was released in the early 90s, late 80s, there's a reasonable chance it appeared on the Amiga, especially if it was popular. So this particular mini console is being brought to you by the same lovely people who brought us the C64 Mini. Those guys are called Retro Game Limited. The system supports many of the conveniences that we have become accustomed to with these modern day mini consoles. So that includes save states, HD output, multiple scaling options. This one in particular has a CRT filter, upgradable firmware, a USB keyboard support, as well as virtual keyboard support. Now, one thing I like about this particular mini console, which not very many of them have done this before, is right out of the box, you can put your own games on it. The NES Classic, the SNES Classic, the Sega Genesis Classic or Mega Drive Classic, those did not. So it's pretty neat that right out of the box, without any type of community modding and hacking, you can put your own games on this system. So, what else is included in the base model? Well, the base model includes 25 built-in games. You also get a USB mouse and a gamepad, as well as the typical hookups, HDMI, power cord, things of that nature, as well as a quick guide, for what that's worth. We don't know all the details yet, so not all 25 games have been announced. We only know of 12, and I'll rattle those off for you. So we've got Alien Breed 3D, Another World, ATR All-Terrain Racing, Battle Chess, Cadaver, Kickoff 2, Pinball Dreams, Simon the Sorcerer, Speedball 2, Brutal Deluxe, The Chaos Engine, Worms, The Director's Cut, and Zool. And also keep in mind you can put your own games on there. So a lot of possibilities here, but there's a kicker, there's a catch. And this one kind of rubs me the wrong way. They want $140 for this console, or £120 for all our UK listener. This seems really overpriced to me, especially considering the SNES and the Genesis Mini launched at $80, the NES Mini launched at $60, and then the same people, these Retro Game Limited guys who made the C64, well, you can go on Amazon and buy a brand new one for $40. So I don't understand why the Amiga 500 Mini needs to cost more than 3 times what the C64 Mini. I don't know if that has something to do with the chip shortage. It just seems off to me. Maybe it's because you're getting a mouse. I don't know. Otherwise, though, it seems pretty cool. It's supposed to launch at the end of March in 2022, so we still have some time. And what I want to know from you listeners is, what games would you like to see in the base model? It's kind of a moot point because, yeah, you can put whatever you want on it to some extent. But what games would you want to sideload? What would be your top 10, so to speak, or top 5, whatever. I'm a sucker for those top 5s. But some of the games I've been thinking about have been Megalomania. It's a strategy game. Also came out for the Genesis. Elite, Sensible Soccer, of course Turrican 2, probably one of the most well-known or most appreciated games for the Amiga. As I mentioned before, several DOS-type games were also released for the Amiga. So we got things like the original Civilization, Dune 2, the original XCOM, the UFO Enemy Unknown, Sid Meier's Pirates, Colonization. I love Colonization. How about Rough and Tumble? That's basically Mario meets Metal Slug. Dynablaster, It's a Bomberman ripoff. North and South. It's a very pricey game for the NES, but hey, it's here for the Amiga. We've got Battle Squadron. So Battle Squadron is a vertical shmup. CF talked a little bit about Koei, and Koei released Bandit Kings of Ancient China, which I believe is popular with some of the strategy people. To be honest with you, I've never really sat down and got into it, but I think if you were able to get over that learning curve, it could definitely be one of these games that just sucks you in. So what are the games that you guys are looking forward to, or what are the games that you remember playing on the Amiga? The Amiga 500. Kind of looking forward to seeing how that thing pans out. Hopefully the price comes down. Maybe as time goes on, they'll knock it down to $100 or less. But time will tell. So let's move on to one other item in retro news. And there's been some speculation that the beloved fighting game Marvel vs. Capcom 2 will get a re-release in the near future. Now, probably not this year, maybe in a year or two. But what's been happening is the fan base for MVC2 has stirred up some people in the industry, or at least one person in particular, and that's Mike Mika. He is the studio head for Digital Eclipse, and Digital Eclipse is the company that worked with Capcom to make the Street Fighter 30th Anniversary Collection, and I think that was it was definitely released for the Switch, and I think it was also released for PS4 and whatever Xbox we're up to now. Mike Mika of Digital Eclipse announced on his Twitter that his company is willing to work on the game Marvel vs. Capcom 2, a re-release, if they can secure a deal with Capcom and Disney, who own the rights to their respective franchises. Now, you're like, oh, well, that's never going to happen. But hey, stay with me. I know it sounds crazy, but Disney has actually worked with Arcade 1-Up to reproduce some of their old cabinets. I know they released X-Men on Arcade 1-Up. You know, these are basically arcade cabinet reproductions, right? There's at least 2, if not 3 other ones that also have the Marvel franchise in them, and Disney signed off on it. It's not a crazy dream to believe that Disney might want to work with a company that's already has experience doing this, a company that already has a relationship with Capcom, and said, oh, free money? Sure, sign me up. So who knows? Marvel vs. Capcom 2 did get a digital release circa 2009, but it was only available for a short period of time. It would be awesome to see this beloved fighting game be re-released in all its glory by a team that has experience doing this. That's something to think about, something to hope for. Maybe we'll see this. With that retro gaming news, let's listen to another chiptune. This is a beautiful one, guys. This is from Goulart. He contributed this particular tune to the SPC Echoes compilation. I believe this was a Battle of the Bits compilation. His tune is known as Nocturnal Seashells Glistening in the Moon. Gotta love it. Listen to it. Open your ear satellites. See you on the other side. let's look at the fail bag. Now, I know KazLab asked me a few questions in his last audio comment. And hey, KazLab, keep bringing the audio comments. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually splice his comment that pertains to me, and then we'll come back and try to break it down.
Oh yeah, and this segment's for Hemrawc a little bit. You were telling me if I ever played Shining Force 1 after I told in an audio comment that I was playing Shining Force 3. Actually, I ended up playing Shining Force 1 after I got kind of burnt out with Shining Force 3. And Shining Force 1 is pretty good, and I got like an hour into it, but I could definitely tell that Shining Force 3 is a better game overall because I think I just like the 32-bit graphics more than the 16-bit graphics, and also because Shining Force 3 is a really long game, because if you don't know, Shining Force 3 was split into 3 different parts, and from what is estimated, it takes about 90 hours to finish all 3 parts. So that's really daunting compared to, I think it only takes maybe about 15 to 20 hours to finish Shining Force 1. But I really enjoyed it. I'm probably going to try to attempt to finish the rest of Shining Force 1 once I'm done with Shining Force 3, which that will probably take me a while. And also, I wanted to ask you another thing about this, Hemrawc. Pure Solar, did you ever get far in it by any chance? I remember on the Monstercast 2, you were talking about how you never even opened the Genesis version, but you have that game on other platforms. Well, there is one version on the Dreamcast that you could technically get that I actually started playing maybe an hour or two of, and it's actually pretty good. It gives you the option to play the Genesis version of the game instead of the new updated graphics. It looks like it's basically the Genesis version, and what's good about it that I think makes it superior to the Genesis version is that you don't need any additional add-ons like the Sega CD in order to access the CD quality music since it's already there. And from what I played, it's pretty fun, but even though I own the game 3 times already, I can never really get too far into Pure Solar. Even though I was really hyped for that game just like you were back in the day, I don't know if I could really muster up the interest to play more of it, but maybe I'll play it again sometimes. But then again, I have a lot of other RPGs I want to get back to, like Skies of Arcadia.
Okay, let's unpack a few things. Let's talk a little bit about Shining Force 3. That is a game I have known about for a while. And yes, I did know it was broken up into 3 sections or 3 different CDs. I did not realize how long it was. I think you mentioned could take 90 hours. Wow. I really need to dive into Shining Force 3. I want to. Unfortunately, I've got a game of Final Fantasy 1 that I'm still in the middle of, thanks to critical failure. I do want to finish it. I know it's no longer the game of the month, but I got a decent start, and I'm pretty excited. I like Final Fantasy 1. In addition to Final Fantasy 1, I also have Final Fantasy 12 International version that I'm still working on, but I haven't played in, I don't know, months. So I hate to start another RPG. But Shining Force is amazing. Amazing series. Good to hear that you're playing some Shining Force 1. I hope you're able to put some more time into it. It's a decent game, particularly if you like that series. But if you're really trying to scratch that Shining Force itch, then you should check out some of the ROM hacks of Shining Force 2, especially Shining Force Tactics and Shining Force Maison Edition. So let me tell you a little bit about these guys. So Shining Force 2, the Maison Edition, changes up some of the characters and classes. It changes existing equipment, different bonuses. It also gives you new accessories, new prices. Magic apparently has really changed in this one. Magic is much more powerful, so it's great when you have it, but it's horrible when your enemy has it. And enemies, on average, tend to be more powerful. There's been some new graphical upgrades to this particular hack. So take a look at Shining Force 2 Maison hack if you are interested in that type of thing. Also is the Shining Force Tactics hack. It's what they call an exciting take on Shining Force 2. Over 60 new pieces of equipment for all the characters. Revamped and balanced spells, much more balanced characters and gameplay in general. Excuse me, if you're trying to keep this legit, the way to go is to buy the game on Steam. I think when it goes on sale, it's like $2, and when it's not $2, it's like $3 or $4. I don't know. It's better than paying $40 or $50 for the cartridge. Buy it on Steam, and then the Steam Workshop will allow you to patch the game, and then you can play those patches more or less as legitimate as you can get. Hey, Kazlap, if you're out there and you're thinking of more Shining Force, hey, take a look at these hacks. So that's pretty cool. Another recommendation for Shining Force, and I'm sure you've heard about it. I don't know if you've played it, but Shining Force CD. So I've played it a little. Unfortunately, what happened, I was playing it on a legit Sega CD, and you have to use one of the Sega CD memory cards. They're kind of rare. There was a third party that a few years back re-released them. So they may not be as expensive as they used to be, but I had one of the original ones. I played it, this was probably circa 2012-ish. I say that to let you know that the equipment I had was old. So it was old even when I was playing it years ago. And that memory card, it sticks into the Genesis cartridge slot of the Sega CD Genesis combo. So I had that in the cartridge slot, and my save got wiped. So I got into it. I mean, I probably put maybe 3 or 4 hours, so I wasn't super deep into it, but I was definitely enough to appreciate it. I was like, oh, wow, this game is pretty cool. So what it is it's a remake of Shining Force Gaiden and Shining Force Gaiden 2 for the Game Gear. I think they up-res the graphics and combine the two games into one. So there you go, Shining Force CD. I need to get back into it. I need to go back and replay it because once I lost my save, I just decided to move on. So there's some recommendations for you, Kaz, or anyone else out there who's curious about the Shining Force series. And let's talk about Pure Solar. Oh, Pure Solar. Yes, I did find out about Pure Solar before it launched. This was way back in the day when I was still doing the Retro League. So I think I had a conversation with Hugh, if you remember Hugh Johnson from the Retro League. And I can't remember if it was an offline conversation or if we had it on the podcast itself. And I kind of told him, hey man, there's this awesome RPGs coming out for the Genesis. This is crazy. This is new. Remember, this was like 2009-ish, before we started getting a lot of newer games for retro systems. So this is cutting edge of the retro scene to re-release an RPG of all things for a 16-bit system. So we're like, whoa, we got this new RPG. It's called Pure Solar. It looks like the old RPGs of the 90s. This is going to be great. I think Hugh had a different attitude. He kind of told me, hey man, you kind of need to calm down. This might be a hoax, or it might not turn out to be as good as you think it may be. I wouldn't recommend you go and fork over your cash for the first edition, because I think there was pre-orders for it. I want to say it was somewhere around like $40 or $50. So based on my conversation with Hugh, I decided not to pre-order it. Well, as you know, pre-orders went bananas and they sold out, and the first editions are now collector's items. I totally missed out. But as soon as I realized that it wasn't a hoax and actually was a good, legitimate game, I'm like, oh, well, sign me up. So I got on the list and I got the second release. And so when I got the second release, I was very busy at the time. I basically took the game, I kept it in the packaging, I kept it sealed, and I put it on the shelf. I never got around to playing it, for years, and after a while I'm like, well, now I don't want to open it. Now it's a collector's item, and it's sealed. Well, unfortunately, I don't know how exactly, but the seal actually broke by itself, or someone somehow broke the seal. So now it's no longer sealed. You could see they had this little sticker there, and the sticker somehow got broke. But now it's still sitting on my shelf. As time went on, I, like yourself, bought the Dreamcast version. I got that about a year ago now, and I was pretty psyched to play it, and then I got sidetracked, like I often do. And so I played it for 15, 20 minutes to oh yeah, it works. And like you said, you can use a new revamped version with high-res graphics. I think it has newer music, I'm not sure. Or you can switch it to the Genesis version. I thought that was really cool. If I do play it, which I hope I do, I would play it on the Genesis version, the 16-bit version. I like the aesthetics of that compared to the newer version. I'm so glad that they gave the player the option to choose which version they like. Kazlab, to answer your question, no, I never really got into playing the game. I definitely got hyped for it. I definitely have the Dreamcast version. Just for those of you who are thinking of trying to buy a Dreamcast copy, because I know now they're, or at least I think they're pretty pricey, a tip is buy the Japanese version. I think that's the cheaper of the versions, because there's a European version, a US version or North American version, and a Japanese version. I can't speak for the European version, but I know that the Japanese version also has English, so you can change it to English. And then it's essentially the same as the North American version. I imagine the European version is also in English. I'm not sure. I don't have the European version. So I bought the Japanese version and got it a little bit cheaper than the US or North American version. And I saved some money that way. And I still have a legit copy. So pretty excited about that. Anyways, Kazlab, thank you for your audio comment. Hopefully that answers some of your questions. Let me know about your Shining Force experiences. Did you finish Shining Force 3? Are you going to finish Shining Force 1? Did you try out these hacks? Let us know. Keep us informed. With that said, let's move to the fail bag portion, where we actually look at some forum questions. So the first one I have is actually not a question. It's more of a service announcement, but I thought it was kind of cool, and I knew about this issue, but I don't think it was ever talked about on the show. This is entitled Important, all caps, important, it's yelling at you. Remove your clock capacitor or your Xbox will die. I'm posting this because it is absolutely vital that all Xbox owners be aware of this issue. Yet it's sadly not common knowledge, and many Xboxes have died, and many more will die over the next several years as a result. This thread should absolutely be stickied as well, so that more people can see this and become aware of this very serious issue. And just as an aside, sorry, kind of coming out of the post here, this actually was, I believe, stickied, because this is 4 years old, and it was at the top of the Xbox forums and GameFAQs. Going back to the post, it says the clock capacitor is a small capacitor on the Xbox motherboard. That allows the Xbox to save its date and time settings for a short period of time while it is unplugged. However, most Xboxes were manufactured with a really bad clock capacitor that eventually leaks acid onto the motherboard, which causes corrosion and eats away at everything until the Xbox eventually becomes unusable. He goes on and talks about the different versions, because different versions have different capacitors. It's a serious issue. If you do have an Xbox, if you do intend on using that Xbox for any prolonged period of time in the next few years, you might as well get these changed. I did it with my Xbox. I didn't personally do it. I paid someone to do it. I don't think it's that difficult of a job to do if you're handy with soldering. But if you didn't know, there is a pretty good chance that at some point, probably in the next 5, maybe 10 years, your clock capacitor will go bad and then leak and eat away on your motherboard. And you don't want that to happen. And unfortunately, all these Xboxes that are just out there, just sitting around, whether it's at a pawn shop or some flea market, they're going to die because no one's taking care of those. I'm interested to see if 5-10 years down the road, original Xboxes that are functional actually are expensive. Most of the Xboxes, I imagine, in 10 years' time that are functional will only be the ones that have had their capacitors changed. And that's primarily going to be done by a select group of collectors. So curious to know what your thoughts are about that. Leave some comments, send your emails to CF. What about these clock capacitors? So another one coming to you from GameFAQs. Are there any Japanese-style games exclusive to the OG Xbox? This is from Leafs Fanatic 81. He says, I was on the Xbox 360 board having a discussion about PS3 versus 360 game prices. I mentioned that I think the most expensive and collectible games on the 360 are going to be Japanese style games such as Akai Katana, or Death's Smiles. When I say Japanese style, I don't necessarily mean developed in Japan or by a Japanese company. For example, I'm aware that Dark Souls is a game written and produced by a Japanese company, but it doesn't scream, "Oh, that's a Japanese thing," to me. Any games like this on the OG Xbox? So, Mr. Leafs Fanatic 81, let me take a swing at this. So you're looking for Japanese styled games. I'm gonna throw out a few, and I don't think any of these were listed in the responses. This is what I got for you. You can check out Metal Dungeon. It does not have good reviews, but it's a Japanese styled game in the sense that it is a turn-based RPG. So it's a dungeon crawler. It is disliked because it is considered repetitive. You can check out the reviews on GameFAQs, but hey, it is a Japanese-styled game in my opinion. Other ones to look for are Puyo Pop Fever. So, the Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine. It's essentially that. Shenmue 2. You can't get more Japanese than Shenmue 2. Come on now. Jet Set Radio Future. That's another one that, to me, it's kind of has a Japanese aesthetic, although it's not a turn-based RPG. How about Phantasy Star Online Episodes 1 and 2? And then the last one, which some might consider, air quote, hidden gem, is Phantom Dust. I believe that actually was developed by a Japanese team. It's a 3D action game where you're kind of shooting energy at different opponents in a destructible environment. Mr. Leafs Fanatic or Miss Leafs Fanatic 81, those are some ones to look for. Some Japanese type games for the original Xbox. Last fail bag. What do we got here? Okay. Again, this is coming to us from GameFAQs. This is from Mr. Darkstorm 16. I was thinking of grabbing a PS1 even though I have a PS2. His question is it worth it? My initial response is no. No, it's not. Like, why do you need a PS1 if you can get a PS2 Slim that can not only play PS1 games, can also play PS2 games and run DVDs? That's kind of my initial response. I did a little digging because I started reading in this post, and this other guy or gal who goes by the name Cyan Rouge did make a few good points. And actually, I didn't know this. Not every single PS1 game plays perfectly in a PS2 game. He mentions Command & Conquer runs a little faster on a PS2. He also talks about Final Fantasy V can freeze and corrupt your memory card. It's funny he or she mentions that because I actually played Final Fantasy V on a PS2. And this was the Final Fantasy V that was it Anthology? Final Fantasy Anthology compilation? It was one of the Final Fantasy compilations. And I believe it was packaged with Final Fantasy VI. That was the first way I played Final Fantasy V. I enjoyed it. I played it on the PS2. I do remember it kind of glitching. I don't exactly remember what it was. I remember there was some problems. It was like it wouldn't start. But once I got to start, it played just fine. I don't ever remember having problems saving. I also don't ever remember having problems with load times. People really harp on the Final Fantasy collections of the PS1 because they have load times. And that might be true for other games, because really Final Fantasy V was the only one of those compilations that I got into, and I don't remember loading times being a big issue. And I enjoyed the game. I love Final Fantasy V. Great game. So moving on, this person also mentions that Grandia crashes randomly on the PS2. Spyro Ripto's Rage apparently glitches out on the PS2 or something like that. So wow, that's kind of cool. I mean, not cool, but it's a cool thing to know that not every single PS1 game works perfectly on a PS2. Because to be honest with you, I kind of thought they more or less all worked on PS1. There are probably a few other titles, but by and large, I really haven't experienced much PS1 glitching on PS2. If anything, it runs better on a PS2 because it loads faster. Or at least I tell myself that because it seems logical because it's a faster system. I don't know, folks. I'm just here. It's just you. It's just me. I need to turn this over to CF. Hey, CF, thanks for having me on. Hopefully I haven't worn out my welcome. And thank you for listening. Thank you for all your support and your time. With that said, I'm turning it back over to CF. This is Hemrawc. Keep rolling retro.
Hemrawc, brother, always good to hear from you. Been a while since I've heard you at the helm of a podcast. Reminds me of the old Retro League days. I did have a couple things that I wanted to sort of bookend with that you mentioned, and I took some notes, but I minimized my notes like a smart guy. There we go. Let's talk about the A500 Mini. This is the first article you talked about with the Amiga Mini release. That does sound really cool. Couple of things here. The price is kind of weird, right? Is it's what did you say it was, like $120 or $112 or something like that? And then you equated it to the C64 Mini, which you could get for $40 brand new even today. I got one for $40, and it was I had to return my initial one, but once I got one that was functioning, it was great. I highly recommend it. It's $40 well spent. One thing to keep in mind with the C64 Mini, though, is they did release that second model that had a functioning keyboard, and that was about the same price bracket, 100 plus. I think, I don't know what it is now, but it launched at 100 euros. So I would imagine at least $120, if you wanted to get it in the US. So does the Amiga whatever Mini, does that have a functioning keyboard? I did look it up on the... I found an article on Eurogamer. Doesn't look like it. It's a Mini. It's very small. And you know what? Give me a second. I'm going to pause this to see if I can get an answer to that question. Yeah, here we go. This is from Eurogamer.net. It supports typical features you'd find in most of the Mini consoles these days, including a save and resume functionality, 50 Hz and 60 Hz screen refresh options, 720 HD, a CRT filter, and more. I just read... Okay, here we go. The A500 Mini comes with both classic 2-button mouse and a new 8-button precision gamepad. Since the keyboard on the Amiga 500 Mini is tiny and unusable, you can plug in a standard USB PC keyboard for alternative functionality. So, functionality-wise, this does really equate to the C64 Mini and not the C64 Maxi, as it were. I don't know. I wouldn't count it out. I don't know much about the Amiga, much like yourself, but for me, it's more... My interest is not so much in keeping up with what has come on the Amiga, but rather being able to play new Amiga games that come out on Indie Retro News and on itch.io and stuff. I see those quite a bit more than I see Commodore 64. Like, Commodore 64 games still come out, and I've bought several, but I'm usually picking like one C64 game out of like 5 or 6 Amiga games. So there's that. I mean, that alone, I don't know if that can justify an extra 3 times the price or whatever it is. But just clicking over to that site now to see what's here, I bet you we're going to find at least one Amiga game. Come on. Yeah, here we go. This new Amiga 500 tech demo turns Super Hang-On, turn into a Super Hang-On remaster. There you go. Super Hang-On on Amiga. It's not out yet, but there you go. We've got... Yeah, Jackal for the NES getting remade for the Amiga. That's 2 on the main page. A couple for the MSX. And 1 for Windows, which you never see. Looks like they remade like a top-down racing game for... Yeah, I don't know. I don't know why that one made it here. It seems out of character. But yeah, more interest for the indie scene that's surrounded the Amiga. Because it's still thriving, it's driven by crazy people for sure, but it is still thriving, and this sort of allows us a gateway into that. Also, not to mention, just like you said, the European folks out there grew up with this more so than they did with the NES. So it would be nice to kind of explore some of that. I tried to do that with emulation a little bit. But the different versions of the Amiga had different like Kickstarter programs, like kicker programs, almost like a BIOS. So you had to get like 4 or 5 different BIOS depending on which machine you were trying to emulate. I couldn't really keep it all straight. So I didn't really get very far with it. So because of that, it might be worth it for me to shell out the money. I thought this was a really good article. Yeah, nice. Thanks for bringing this up. What else did you talk about? Oh, you wanted to know top 5 games on the Amiga that I would check out. I honestly don't have a top 5, but the stuff that's new. We could just check out the best 5 games. Yeah, here we go. Top 10 Amiga games. Here we go. Let's let this load. Top 10 most influential Amiga games. There we go. Let's see that. We'll drop down to 5. Bear with me. Defender of the Crown. Sensible Soccer. That's one I know that was popular overseas. I've heard that talked about quite a bit. Never played it. Speedball 2, which I think you said was on there. Syndicate from Bullfrog. Lemmings. Pinball Dreams. I love my pinball. Actually, I have that on GOG.com, the old DOS version. That's a good game. Cannon Fodder. Beast. Another World. That one, not so much for me, because I played Another World quite a bit on the Ouya, of all things. That was one that it got a DOS. What was it called? What was the company that was making like old game releases for a little while? DOS Emu or something like that. And they eventually stopped. They also did like the R-Type games and something. They released Another World for the Ouya, and I picked it up, played it quite a bit. The original Worms is on this list, and I think that's it. So that is a good summary of what I would do with an Amiga in front of me, is look at a list of what are the best games on the Amiga and then track them down and make sure I could play them. That would be my plan. Next on the list you had Marvel vs. Capcom 2. That's funny to hear that as like a rare thing. I didn't even think about it because I remember when it came out in 2009, like when it was last re-released. They put it out on the well, I should say it like this. I encountered it on the Xbox 360, and it was one that just kind of came and went, and I just kind of went right past it without thinking, and I haven't thought about it again since then. I know it's a beloved fighting game, but at the time I remember hearing, look, you can get this game now, but the people who are playing it, there's no way you're going to hold any ground online. I just let it go on the basis that there wasn't any point unless I was deciding to come back and play through it single player. I know it's a great game. I do. I play the original Marvel vs. Capcom a little bit on the Dreamcast, and I enjoy it. That's cool that it's coming out again, because, or at least that they're just talking about it coming out again, because I know how rights issues are complicated. I do hold out hope that it could happen. I mean, very much to your point, I think you hit the nail on the head. Disney likes to play it close to the chest with their licenses, but they do love money, so all hope is not lost. The last 2 things I wanted to comment was the Pure Solar thing and the Xbox clock capacitor. Let's talk about the clock capacitor first. My particular Xbox, I have not checked this out yet, but I have a hard modded Xbox from back in the day, so I should open it up and take a look. I booted this thing up a couple of times in the last year or so as far as I know it's still working, but it doesn't really get played, to be perfectly honest. The only time I ever play my original Xbox is if a new game is coming across my desk and I want to try it, make sure it works or something like that. It's been a bit. But I noticed that they've, at least for me, I haven't been to the thrift stores much, but they seem to have dried up on the thrift stores. I will pick one up the next time I spot one at a thrift store, take it home, see if I can clean it up, and just sock it away. Because, yeah, I think I'm with you. I think, assuming these things are the time bombs they're saying they are, we're going to see a big decrease in available Xbox hardware. Now let's talk about Pure Solar. And I saved this one for last because I think this one's the best. Pure Solar, I remember the hype that was surrounding the original Pure Solar. And I vividly remember you being all on the hype train and your boys over at the Retro League being not really so much on the hype train. This was a thing that you wanted to bring up like every single week, and it reached a point where you were like, all right, I know, here's my Pure Solar update, it's still coming. And everyone was like, oh, okay. But you're right, I didn't think about it much, but at that time we were not seeing any of these like modern games being released for old consoles, at least not nearly as much. Like, I remember, was that around the time that, like, Ed Fries made Halo 2600 or something. So we had Halo 2600, and I think there was a handful of games you could buy over on retrousb.com for the NES. Like they were making a Christmas game every year that had LED lights in it or something, and that was really it. And they were all mega expensive. The only real old school repro that was reliable was that you could always buy a copy of the Nintendo World Championship cart that was supposed to be like the Holy Grail or whatever on the NES. You could buy like a blue see-through reproduction of that. And that was really it. And now it's a completely different world. So go figure. I guess one could say that Pure Solar paved the way a little bit for that entire trend. I don't know. By the way, your old buddy Hughes Johnson is still out there doing podcasting. He is now on a show called the Retro Game Club Podcast. And they can be found at retrogameclub.net, and they're also on Twitter, and they do a good job. So, that said, I think that's about all I got. Hemrawc, man, it was awesome to hear you. Thanks so much for stepping in. It was great. I really enjoyed that. Hope you don't mind me bookending a little bit. And with that, that's the week. Like Hemrawc said, this is the end of the fiscal year. Things go bananas for me at work, so we're just trying to make it through till then. Monday Night Morrowind for the supporters. We're taking a break until October. Then that will return. We're still having a good time here. Still playing the games, doing the thing. And whatever it is you guys are doing, whether you're tied up at work like I am, or you're trying to deal with school, or sticking out this whole coronavirus mess, whatever it is, I hope it's going well for you, and I'm rooting for you. I really am. Special thanks to Hemrawc for guest hosting, and also to Sendu and Emerald Rangers for allowing us to be aired on their network. I'll see you guys next week.